Part 10. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuchi. Chapter 91. The next moment is to witness a miracle. When seeing Zhang Fenjai's arm withdraw from the black mirror, 5 pieces of talisman paper and a small porcelain bottle suddenly appeared in his palm. A strange idea flashed through the minds of Sulitzi, Shenloxi and Wang Denmei at the same time. After all, there was nothing when his right hand reached into the black mirror. Placing the 5 pieces of talisman paper and 2 porcelain bottles snatched from the grey-robed old man on the table, Zhang Fenjai ignored Sulitzi and the other 2 behind him, and said while looking directly at the black mirror, "Lin Dayuan, Lin Shalan, do you want to resolve the bloody disaster of the Lin family on the day of the beginning of autumn?" The grey-robed old man left abruptly, and the time was getting closer and closer to midnight. Lin Dayuan gradually fell into fear and helplessness. Because he knew very well the horror and terror of the bloody disaster that the Lin family was about to encounter, and he knew that this disaster could not be avoided or hidden. At this time, Zhang Fenjai's voice of willingness to help rang out in the room, making him feel like a drowning struggler who suddenly saw a life-saving straw. He immediately woke up from his fear and helplessness, and then excitedly clasped his fists and said, "Yes, of course I am willing. Lin Dayuan, if you want me to help, there are conditions." Zhang Fenjai, with a slight smile on his face, reminded with a hint of coldness in his tone. "Master Zhang, as long as you are willing to help my Lin family resolve the bloody disaster, I, Lin Dayuan, will agree to any conditions and requirements." Lin Dayuan immediately promised without any hesitation. After getting Lin Dayuan's guarantee, Zhang Fenjai closed his eyes and thought for a while, then opened his eyes again and said, 300 million. If you want me to help resolve the bloody disaster that the Lin family is about to encounter, then you must bring 300 million in cash to see me on the first floor of Xintang building before 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. After hearing the huge amount of cash that Zhang Fenjai asked for, Lin Shalan couldn't help but open her cherry mouth, with an unbelievable look in her eyes. Although the Lin family's business has been very prosperous in recent years, and the profits of various branches are also very good, but after excluding various expenses, the net profit for a year is only more than 80 million. 300 million is almost equivalent to the Lin family's income for nearly 4 years, and Zhang Fenjai really dared to ask for it. So, Lin Shalan, who knew her grandfather's character, quickly replaced the unbelievable look in her eyes with ridicule, because she knew that her grandfather would definitely not agree to Zhang Fenjai's excessive request. But Lin Dayuan's next response was completely beyond her expectations. "Okay, before 10 o'clock tomorrow, I will definitely go to Xintang building with 300 million in cash to meet young Master Zhang." "Grandpa, 300 million in cash is..." "Let's not talk about whether the Lin family can collect 300 million in cash in just one night. Even if they can, 300 million in cash will almost occupy 90% of the working capital that the Lin family can mobilize. If 90% of the working capital is taken away at once, it will inevitably affect the normal operation of each branch company. In serious cases, it may cause the bankruptcy of the branch company, and then drag down the operation of the head office." Therefore, Lin Shalan couldn't help but want to remind her, but before she could say the reminder, she was interrupted by Lin Dayuan. "I am the patriarch of the Lin family and have the power to make any decision." It seems that Lin Dayuan interrupted Lin Shalan's reminder forcefully, but in fact, he had unspeakable difficulties. As an old fox who has been doing business for decades, how could he not know what kind of risks the withdrawal of 90% of the working capital would bring to the company and the family? But in the face of a bloody disaster that could kill more than a dozen people in the Lin family, the existence of any branch or head office is meaningless, and the hundreds of millions and billions of assets are just numbers. After all, when a person dies, it is like a light going out, and there is no chance to enjoy the wealth and power. So, let alone the 300 million proposed by Zhang Fenjai, as long as he can save the lives of the Lin family, Even if it is 500 million or 1 billion, he will nod and agree without hesitation, and try every means to take it out. Suppress the evil talisman, stick it on the door of your Lin family villa. Lin Dayuan is just an ordinary old man with declining blood and energy. Whether it is wealth or luck, it is clearly displayed in front of Zhang Fengjai. He knows that the other party's guarantee is not a trick. Moreover, even if the other party betrays his promise afterwards, he has a punishment method that will make the other party regret for life. So, he took out the 3 talismans that the third grandfather asked him to pass on when he left the Taoist temple from his sleeves, and then sent them one by one through the black mirror to Lin Dayuan, and explained in detail how to use the talisman. Soul Calming Talisman, stick it on the door frame of your bedroom. Protective Amulet, stick it on your heart. Thank you, young Master Zhang, thank you, young Master Zhang. Lin Dayuan reached out to take the 3 talismans, and bowed excitedly to thank him. When he sent out the 3 talismans and was about to disperse the black and white mirror, Zhang Fengjai sighed and reminded him. Lin Dayuan, in fact, the 3 talismans just now were prepared by my third grandfather for you to resolve the blood disaster in advance. If Lin Qilan had not done the ugly thing of humiliating the family and destroying the family, I would have asked her to pass these 3 talismans to you. If you, Lin Dayuan, come to apologize at 3:30 p.m. with 30 million in cash, I will choose to forgive you and give you the talisman. But you and Lin Qilan not only didn't do that, but also betrayed third grandpa's wishes, so all this is your own fault. After leaving a seemingly kind reminder, but in fact a stern warning, Zhang Fengjai's right hand slapped the black and white mirror and shouted softly. Scatter! As the black and white mirror shattered, 3 copper coins with a simple color appeared in Zhang Fengjai's right palm. Then, he put the 3 copper coins, the 5 talisman papers and 2 small porcelain bottles on the table into his sleeves, and then turned around to explain it briefly to Sulitsi. But to everyone's surprise, his sudden turn happened to bump into Shen Loxi, who quietly walked to the desk and planned to carefully observe the talisman paper and the small porcelain bottle. Shen Loxi is about 1.7 meters tall, and with a pair of 6 centimeter high heels, she is 1.77 meters tall. And Zhang Fengjai is 1.78 meters tall. This resulted in the 2 people who bumped into each other, lips touching lips. Shen Loxi, who was brought up in a strict family, had never been in a relationship, so she kept her first kiss. Zhang Fengjai, who had lived in a Taoist temple since childhood, rarely met girls who made his heart beat, so he also kept his first kiss. So, the 2 people who gently pressed their lips together forgot to separate for a moment because of astonishment and confusion. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 92. Yezi, Luo 11, what are you doing? It was not until Sulitsi's scream suddenly rang in their ears that Zhang Fengjai and Shen Loxi suddenly reacted and separated immediately. Then, Shen Loxi, with a face as red as an apple, ran into the lounge with her head down. Zhang Fengjai, whose face was also blushing, looked at Sulitsi cautiously, not knowing what to say. However, the mental shock that was like a thunderbolt just now, and the trace of sweetness left at the corner of his mouth, made him miss the wonderful feeling just now. As for Wang Denmei, who was standing at the door of the office, she glanced at Sulitsi, then at Zhang Fengjai, and finally couldn't help but sigh and shook her head, then walked towards the lounge to visit Shen Loxi. Yezi, you and Loxi are not suitable. After screaming at the top of her lungs, Sulitsi suddenly felt a little regretful. Because what happened just now was not the fault of Zhang Fengjai and Shen Loxi at all, but an accident that no one expected. However, thinking of the accident that happened just now, which caused her to lose her first kiss with Zhang Fengjai after peeping for a long time, she felt extremely unhappy and worried that Zhang Fengjai would fall in love with Shen Loxi. After all, whether it was appearance and figure or knowledge and family background, Shen Loxi was much better than her. So, she walked directly to Zhang Fengjai, held his hands, and reminded him in a calm tone. Sister Litzy, I know. Whether it was knowledge or appearance, the gap between him and Shen Loxi was as big as the difference between heaven and earth, so Zhang Fengjai nodded very self-awarely. Yezi, it's almost time to get off work anyway, so why don't you just go home with me first? Zhang Fengjai's self-awareness did not make Sulitzi completely relieved. Because she knew that feelings were the most unpredictable thing, she couldn't guarantee whether Shen Loxi, who also lost her first kiss, would have different thoughts. After all, the means that Zhang Fengjai constantly displayed had a fatal attraction for girls. Therefore, she had to take Zhang Fengjai down as soon as possible to avoid being preempted by the more outstanding Shen Loxi. This. Not only had she agreed to Shen Loxi's visit to her villa at night, but she also had to carefully check the environment of the villa so that she could arrange the means to kill Zhu Ziqiang in advance. Therefore, facing Sulitzi's proposal, Zhang Fengjai suddenly seemed a little embarrassed and didn't know how to refuse. Mr. Shen has something to do in the evening. Knowing that Zhang Fengjai had neither relatives and friends nor a place to stay in Ningji City, the only one who could make him feel embarrassed was Shen Loxi, who could occupy his private space. I'm going to Mr. Shen's house tonight, and then I'll treat her tomorrow night, Zhang Fengjai answered truthfully. It just so happens that I have nothing to do at night, so I might as well go with you. Since it is impossible to take Zhang Fengjai down by spending time alone at night, it is necessary to ensure that Shen Loxi and Zhang Fengjai do not have any intimate behavior beyond the relationship between the boss and the bodyguard, so Sulitzi also immediately proposed to go together. In response, Zhang Fengjai spread his hands helplessly, and then pointed to the door of the lounge. Don't worry about it, I'll go and tell Loxi. After squeezing Zhang Fengjai's hand hard, Sulitzi gave him a charming smile, stepped forward and pushed open the door of the lounge, and then walked in directly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Zhang Fengjai also quickly took out the two small porcelain bottles in his sleeves, opened them and checked them separately, then frowned and muttered to himself. The blue-spotted tiger that just condensed the demonic energy and the 120-year-old green bamboo snake have less demonic power in their blood. However, the disappointment did not last long. Zhang Fengjai, who put away the two small porcelain bottles again, muttered to himself to comfort himself. Forget it, even if the power is less, it is more effective than the blood of ordinary beasts. It is enough to break Zhu Ziqiang's evil magic, and then use the poisonous blood of the centipede to kill him. It is unknown what Sulitzi and Shen Loxi talked about. After the door of the lounge was opened, the two walked out talking and laughing. At this time, Sulitzi did not show any dissatisfaction, and Shen Loxi's face was completely back to normal. However, when her eyes swept over Zhang Fengjai, a trace of shyness flashed in her eyes. Yezi, let's go to Mr. Shen's villa together. After greeting Zhang Fengjai, Sulitzi and Shen Loxi continued to talk and laugh and left the office, while Wang Denmei stuck out her tongue at Zhang Fengjai and quickly chased after him. In this regard, Zhang Fengjai, who had no idea what was going on, could only shrug helplessly, and then greeted the little black dog who was rubbing his wound. Let's go, let's have a feast. Hearing that they were going to have a feast, the little black dog immediately stood up excitedly, and then chased after him with his tail wagging. However, when passing the office area, Zhang Fengjai unexpectedly discovered that the density of black clouds gathered above Pan Switting, who was sitting in the corner of the office, had increased by at least 5 times compared to when she left yesterday, which made him frown. Even if there was a problem with the feng shui layout of the office area, at most it would make the staff feel weak, and it was impossible to gather such a thick evil spirit. But just when he wanted to further check the reason for the increase in black clouds, Shen Loxi, who had been secretly paying attention to him, reminded him with a hint of anger in his tone. Zhang Fengjai, hurry up, otherwise, you have to walk by yourself. Coming. Considering that he was already a staff member of Yongsheng Group and would have plenty of time and opportunities in the future, He quickly dispelled his inner doubts and hurried up to catch up. After Shen Loxi and Zhang Fengjai left, Pan Switting, who was sitting in the corner of the office, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then she quietly took out a mirror from her pocket and took a look at her bloodshot eyes and slightly, a hint of paleness. Then she put down the mirror and took out a silk doll and an iron needle for embroidery from the drawer. She looked up at the colleagues around her and found that everyone was busy with their work and no one noticed her. She quickly pricked her finger with an iron needle, and then put 2 drops of blood on the doll. On both eyes. In just a second or two, 2 drops of blood melted into the rag doll's eyes. The originally black and white eyes gradually turned a frightening scarlet color. Immediately afterwards, Pan Switting placed the rag doll on the keyboard in front of her eyes. Suddenly, the computer keyboard, which was not being operated by anyone, began to type automatically, and lines of words began to appear on the computer screen. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 93. Guanghe Huafu, the only high-end villa area in Ningji City. The price of each villa is more than 10 million. In the villa area, there are a total of 36 luxury villas with independent courtyards, corresponding to the 36 Tiangang stars in mythological novels. Therefore, anyone who can live in Guanghe Huafu is either a powerful person or a wealthy person. Among them, Shen Loxi's villa is number 23, which just corresponds to Tianwei star. Whether it is the ranking of the stars or the area and environment of the villa, the Shen family ranks relatively low among the 36 villas, which also shows that Shen Zhenghao's economic and political status in Ningji City is still slightly worse. As night falls, the sky is full of stars. Standing in the courtyard and looking up at the constellations in the sky, Zhang Fengjai's eyes reveal a look of admiration. Whether it is the irregular construction method of the 36 villas or the overall location of Guanghe Huafu, it not only occupies the 3 branches of fortune, wealth, and luck in physiognomy, but also contains gold, wood, water, and wood in the 5 elements of feng shui. This is enough to show that before developing Guanghe Huafu, Zhulang Group must have invited a top feng shui master, who may even be a feng shui master who practices Taoism. Otherwise, it would be impossible to forcibly accommodate the 3 branches and 5 elements through artificial construction. The only regret is that due to the influence of the 36 Tiangang stars, the overall layout of the villa area lacks the more critical fire in the 5 elements. Because fire helps wealth and fortune, in an environment lacking the key 5 elements of fire, it sometimes affects the wealth and power of the owners of the 36 villas. It may be for this reason that Zhulang Group will turn its attention to Lala Village, which naturally contains the complete 5 elements. Dr. Zhang, it's already late, why not go to rest early? Seeing that Zhang Fengjai had been standing in the yard for nearly an hour and had no intention of returning to the villa to rest, Su Shiqiang couldn't help but persuade him. After all, Zhang Fengjai will have to treat Shen Loxi tomorrow evening, so he needs to stay in very good condition. Manager Su, do the Zhu family father and son live in the villa area? After retracting his gaze from the sky and the stars, Zhang Fengjai looked at the villa area where the lights kept turning off, and asked with a hint of intention in his eyes. No. Shaking his head, Su Shiqiang explained. Since the Blue Sky Group's business is mainly nursery and flower farming, it needs a lot of fields to grow precious flowers and plants, so the Zhu family father and son have always lived in the villa they built in the base. After hearing Su Shiqiang's explanation, the intention in Zhang Fengjai's eyes was instantly replaced by disappointment. If the Zhu family father and son also lived in the villa area, then he could use the talisman and the blood of the monster to connect with the 36 Tiangang stars, and then use the power of the talisman, the spiritual power and the fusion of starlight to temporarily trap Zhu Ziqiang. After successfully solving the soul-eating goo in Shen Loxi's mind, he slowly learned from Zhu Ziqiang how they embarked on the road of evil cultivation, how they obtained the art of raising gu that the Jigumiao people never passed on, and how to get the precious blood-eating gu and soul-eating gu. Butler Su, I have some personal matters to deal with. You should go and rest first. Since it is impossible to use special methods to trap Zhu Ziqiang, it is necessary to arrange defense means in advance, so Zhang Fengjai plans to take advantage of the quiet night to carefully observe the structure of the entire villa area, and then select the specific location suitable for defense. Okay then. Su Shiqiang nodded and turned to enter the villa. Zhang Fengjai also stepped out of the villa directly, and then mobilized his spiritual power to cooperate with the Qingfeng step to observe the entire villa area. It took more than half an hour to select a total of 3 suitable locations for defense. He quickened his pace to return to Shen Loxi's villa. However, just as he passed the villa of Tianmenxing, which ranked 7th among the 36 Tiangongxing, he vaguely heard the sound of struggle and help from the villa. Thinking that the ranking of Tianmenxing is far higher than Tianwuxing, it means that the villa owner who issued the call for help is far more financially and powerful than Shen Gao. Zhang Fengjai, who did not want to cause any trouble to the Shen family, finally decided to stand aside and not get involved. As long as you let my child go, I will agree to whatever you ask. But just as he was about to leave, he heard a woman's voice of surrender, which made him change his mind and prepare to take action immediately. Because the situation he was facing now just corresponded to the principle of 3 kills and 3 rescues that his second grandfather asked him to follow. The spiritual power combined with the speed of the Qingfeng step allowed Zhang Fengjai to rush to the fence of the villa quickly, but the 4 green eyes that suddenly lit up in the yard made him stop abruptly. Because the 4 eyes that lit up with green light were the 2 ferocious Tibetan mastiffs that were known to be able to fight tigers and lions. Of course, the reason for stopping was not that he was afraid of the 2 Tibetan mastiffs that looked like calves, but that he did not want to alarm the owner of the villa because of the low roar of the Tibetan mastiff. Take a deep breath, slowly mobilize the breath left on the body by the 5 special beings of Shushan, and then control the breath to instantly cover the 2 Tibetan mastiffs that were not locked and were ready to attack. 1 second. Less than a second. The 2 Tibetan mastiffs that could fight tigers and lions fell to the ground without any sound. Zhang Fengjai lightly touched the ground with his right foot, and flew nearly 3 meters into the air, slowly landing in the yard. Then, he walked in front of the 2 silent Tibetan mastiffs, and said with a trace of regret in his eyes, "I hope your loyalty can move the judge of hell so that you can be reborn as a human being instead of an animal in the next life." After leaving a regretful blessing, Zhang Fengjai quickly rushed to the front of the villa, stepped on the ground with both feet and flew nearly 4 meters into the air, then sneaked into the 2nd floor of the villa through an open window. According to the crying and vague begging for mercy, he soon came to the door of a bedroom. Fortunately, the bedroom door was not only unlocked, but also had a crack open. Through the crack in the door, Zhang Fengjai saw the scene that made him furious. A guy like a fat pig was tearing a woman's clothes hard, and 2 meters away from the fat hunter, there was a little girl as cute as a porcelain doll tied up. However, the little girl who should have been lovable, not only had a look of fear in her eyes, but also had a bleeding wound on her pink neck. The sharp knife dropped from the fat pig's feet. How could Zhang Fengjai not see that the wound on the little girl's neck was caused by the disgusting fat pig? After using the strong wind to push open the door, Zhang Fengjai flashed behind the fat pig, then stretched out his hand to pinch his fat neck, and directly lifted up the fat pig weighing more than 200 kilograms. "Boy, you dare to sneak into my villa and ruin my fun. I think you are really tired of living." The fat pig was in high spirits, but was suddenly destroyed by someone, causing him to be furious. He did not notice that the other party was lifting him with one hand at this time, and threatened him directly. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 94. Ignoring Fat Pig's threat, Zhang Fengjai threw him aside with force. Boom! The weight of more than 200 kilograms, coupled with the weight of the free fall, not only caused a violent roar in the room, but also almost cracked the floor made of cement and wooden boards. Of course, the severe impact and pain also caused Fatty Pig to faint directly. After taking a look at the woman with an appearance as bright as the autumn moon and boundless spring breeze, Zhang Fengjai casually picked up a piece of Fat Pig's clothes to cover her up, and then stepped towards the porcelain doll-like little girl. "It's okay, don't be afraid, it was just a nightmare." After untying the rope tied to the little girl, Zhang Fengjai comforted her softly while gently massaging her temples with his hands. Soon, the little girl who looked like a porcelain doll fell asleep. After placing the little girl on the soft sofa so that she could sleep more comfortably, Zhang Fengjai took out the silver needle and helped her seal the wound, then turned to look at the woman who had stopped sobbing long ago and asked, "Tell me, what is going on?" But what made him very confused next was that the woman who was bullied first turned her head and glanced at the fainted Fat Pig, then looked at the little girl lying on the sofa, and finally stared at Zhang Fengjai and asked, "Who are you? Don't worry about who I am, first tell me what is going on." After hearing the other party's unreasonable rhetorical questions and his indifference towards the little girl, Zhang Fengjai became confused and couldn't help but observe the other party's face carefully. There is an excess of lone gods and insufficient yin and yang. The male palace is green and the female palace is pink. It is obvious that he belongs to a person who specializes in special services. Generally, people who engage in this kind of profession will not have any resistance or struggle as long as the price is right. So, what happened to the please and please just now? What about the little girl who was stabbed? Do you understand role-playing? The woman who didn't care about the exposure of her important place and simply threw away her Fat Pig clothes took out a black slim-fitting dress from the bag on the table while explaining what just happened. By playing different roles, we can meet the various twisted requirements of customers. Do you understand? What about this little girl? The other party's explanation was relatively easy to understand. Although Zhang Fengjai finally understood what happened, half of the doubts in his heart were still unresolved, and that was what happened to the little girl who was stabbed. "I don't know either." Shrugging her shoulders, the woman took out a women's cigarette from her bag, lit it, took a deep breath, and then exhaled slowly, explaining that she didn't know what the little girl's existence was about. "When I got the call for home service, this little girl was already in this room." Since the woman in front of him didn't know what was going on, he could only ask the Fat Pig who fainted. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai stood up and walked to Zhu Fei, then raised his palm and slapped his fat face hard. Crack! With a slap that made the woman feel vague pain, the fainted Fat Pig slowly came to life. "Boy, do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is? You know." When Fat Pig saw the thin young man standing in front of him, he thought that his interest was interrupted, and that he had just been thrown away and knocked unconscious like garbage. The unknown anger burning in his heart made him immediately threaten. But before he could say the threatening words, he was stopped abruptly by a finger that suddenly clicked on his neck. Then, the fingers that controlled his speech were tapped 3 times on his chest, abdomen, and waist. Immediately afterwards, several unbearable feelings including pain, itching, soreness, swelling, numbness, etc. made the Fat Pig tremble all over. At the same time, he opened his mouth and planned to howl, but found that he could not make any sound at all. In the end, he could only relieve the uncomfortable feeling all over his body by rolling around. You, what on earth did you do to Master Zhu?" Seeing the Fat Pig that couldn't stop screaming and could only roll on the ground, the woman screamed with a look of horror in her eyes. "If you don't want to do it again, shut up immediately." Zhang Fengjai suddenly looked up at the woman and threatened with a sharp look. After the woman was so frightened that she covered Cherry's little mouth, Zhang Fengjai said to the Fat Pig rolling on the ground, "As long as you obey me, I will help relieve your pain." The fat pig who couldn't speak quickly nodded vigorously after hearing Zhang Fenjai's conditions for forgiveness. Pa, pa, pa. Reaching out and patting Fatty Pig 3 times in succession, Zhang Fenjai pointed at the little girl on the sofa and asked, "What happened to her?" After the painful feeling disappeared, Fatty Pig suddenly felt a sense of relief from the aftermath of the disaster. This was a brand new feeling that he had never experienced before, so he was so immersed in this feeling that he didn't hear Zhang Fenjai's question at all. From this point alone, we can see how heartless he is, but he is also very easy to be satisfied. The method of torturing you just now is not cruel enough. How about I let you try the hand that divides muscles and bones described in the novel? After waiting for several seconds and not hearing Fatty Pig's response, Zhang Fenjai couldn't help but turn his head and glance, and found that he had an expression of enjoyment and satisfaction on his face. He was so angry that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, eager to know why the little girl appeared here, he did not give the fat pig more time to enjoy himself, and stretched out his finger to press on his waist and threatened. Enjoyment is enjoyment, but the fat pig does not want to endure the torture of excruciating pain, so he quickly opened his eyes and explained. After hearing the fat pig's explanation, Zhang Fenjai's face gradually darkened. It turned out that in order to make the role-playing more realistic and to meet his special psychological needs, the fat pig asked his men to find a little girl of 5 or 6 years old to serve as a prop in the role-playing process. The little girl lying on the sofa was a rural child from a poor family. The reason why her parents agreed to this request. First, the fat pig paid more money. Second, the fat pig promised that he would never hurt the little girl. Third, the family's idea of favoring boys over girls was very serious. They had already given birth to 7 girls and were secretly trying to create a son. As for the reason why the little girl was tied up and injured. First, it was the need of the scene. Second, it was the fat pig's momentary mistake. Looking at the fat pig who didn't realize his mistake at all and looked indifferent, and thinking about the girl lying on the sofa who looked like a porcelain doll, Zhang Fenjai suddenly had an urge to slap the fat pig directly. Fortunately, he knew that the family of this unremarkable fat man in front of him was very powerful. If he slapped him to death on impulse, the turmoil caused might alarm the 3 grandfathers. So, he took a deep breath, forcibly suppressed the murderous intent that kept churning in his heart, and threatened the fat pig nakedly. "Do you want to die next? Or do you want to live?" The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 95. Do you want to die next? Or do you want to live? After hearing Zhang Fenjai's threat, Fatty Zhu was stunned for a moment as he began to recall his feelings for the rest of his life. Then, he stared at Zhang Fenjai with curiosity in his eyes for a while. Finally, after letting out a disdainful sneer, he struggled to get up from the floor. "My surname is Zhu and my name is Zhenjun. I am an executive director of Ningji City Jazik Group and the only legal heir of the group." While moving his fat body towards the refrigerator, Fat Pig introduced himself and gave his final choice. "If you are not afraid of death or of injuring your parents, relatives, and friends, then you can go ahead and do it." Zhang Fenjai had no idea what the Jazik Group did or how much financial power and influence it had. However, Zhu Zhenjun's attitude of being indifferent to life and death, or his maturity that had experienced countless storms, was completely beyond his expectations, which also completely failed his original plan. "Wine, red wine, beer, or white wine?" After opening the refrigerator, Zhu Zhenjun asked, pointing to the various famous wines placed in the refrigerator. "Mineral water." In the blink of an eye, he completely turned his enemies into friends. Zhu Zhenjun's abnormal way of thinking made Zhang Fenjai feel very uncomfortable. At the same time, he could only try to be vigilant and choose the cheapest mineral springs that he could drink or not. "Water. In addition to wine, I have wine here. If you want to drink mineral water, you can either go out and buy it yourself, or go to the tap to pick it up yourself. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's reply, Zhu Zhenjun suddenly felt unhappy and sarcastically said. However, irony being irony, Zhu Zhenjun finally chose a beer with a slightly lower alcohol content for Zhang Fenjai and threw it directly to him. The heavenly court is full, the earthly pavilion is round, the palace of fortune is glowing crimson, and the palace of wealth is even more purple. Taking advantage of the moment when he reached out to take the beer, Zhang Fenjai quickly took a look at Zhu Zhenjun's face and found that he had the very rare appearance of being rich and powerful in the world. However, there is a crack in the parents' palace between his eyebrows, indicating that his parents' marriage has been broken and they have gone solo. At the same time, the male and female palace under the eyebrows turned dark blue, and there was also a deep crack, indicating that he had suffered emotional betrayal and the damage was relatively serious. Through Zhu Zhenjun's abnormal thinking and behavior, combined with his extremely wealthy appearance, Zhang Fenjai could basically tell what kind of person Zhu Zhenjun was, which also made the murderous intention he forcibly suppressed disappear in an instant. Done, Zhu Zhenjun signaled, holding up the slightly higher alcohol foreign beer in his hand. Done, Zhang Fenjai responded, also raising the bottle. After drinking the beer in the bottle in one breath, Zhang Fenjai stood up and walked to the refrigerator, then selected a bottle of 52-degree strong flavor liquor from the refrigerator. Zhu Zhenjun, a bottle of liquor, agreed to my request. Zhang Fenjai stood in front of Zhu Zhenjun again, shaking the bottle in his hand and said, "Can." Without even asking about the specific content of Zhang Fenjai's request, Zhu Zhenjun simply nodded in agreement. "Thanks." After thanking him, Zhang Fenjai cut off the mouth of the bottle with his finger and a knife, and then drained the liquor in one breath. Whether it is the eldest grandfather who is proficient in medical skills, the second grandfather who is bloodthirsty, or the third grandfather who is Taoist and spiritual, they have encouraged and cultivated his drinking capacity and taste since he was a child. After more than 10 years of alcohol testing, although he dare not say that he can drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk, but for him, 1 or 2 bottles of liquor is almost like gargling his mouth. Therefore, Zhang Fenjai's expression did not change at all after he drank a bottle of liquor in one go. Good. He drank a bottle of high-quality white bottle in one go without even frowning. Zhang Fenjai's bold move made Zhu Zhenjun feel very happy and excited, and he couldn't help but cheer. At the same time, he also began to identify with the young man in front of him who was thin and very skilled. Because among the group of friends he met, although there were some who drank well, no one could be as generous as Zhang Fenjai. Zhu Zhenjun, choose a new family for this little girl, a family that can love her, pamper her, not hurt her, and give her happiness. Holding the finished bottle of wine, Zhang Fenjai stared into Zhu Zhenjun's eyes and demanded. No problem. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's request, Zhu Zhenjun nodded in agreement without any hesitation. Then, he squinted his eyes and thought for a while, and then expressed his arrangements and ideas. Brother, my nanny is infertile due to physical reasons. She has always been eager to adopt a well-behaved daughter. At the same time, I am also willing to pay 1 million in cash as compensation for the sins I have committed against her. Brother Zhu, thank you. After hearing Zhu Zhenjun's arrangement, Zhang Fenjai nodded with satisfaction and thanked him. Then, he suddenly remembered the 2 Tibetan mastiffs that were scared to death by using their special aura when he broke into the villa just now, and said with a hint of apology and embarrassment in his tone. Brother Zhu, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were playing a role-playing game, so I accidentally killed 2 of your Tibetan mastiffs just now. Hearing that Zhang Fenjai had quietly killed the 2 Tibetan mastiffs he had bought at a huge price, Zhu Zhenjun jumped up suddenly, and then rushed out of the room at a speed that was not suitable for his fat figure. You stay in the room and take care of this little girl. Seeing the woman who was also about to leave the room, Zhang Fenjai gave a sharp order and jumped directly from the second-floor windowsill to the yard, arriving in front of the bodies of the 2 Tibetan mastiffs 1 step ahead of Zhu Zhenjun. Brother, How did you kill them? There were no wounds on the body, no white foam in the mouth after being poisoned, and no trace of fighting at the scene, which made Zhu Zhenjun, who had carefully examined the two Tibetan mastiffs, feel very confused and puzzled. Of course, in addition to confusion and puzzlement, there was no anger or sadness in his eyes. This also shows that he did not have a deep affection for the two Tibetan mastiffs, and he did not mean to blame Zhang Fengjai for killing them. Brother Zhu, I'm sorry, this is my personal secret, and it is not convenient to disclose it for the time being. Zhang Fengjai chuckled and refused. Brother, is it someone from your Taoist sect? Zhang Fengjai's refusal to answer made Zhu Zhenjun, who was very curious, couldn't help but guess secretly. Whether it was the fact that he could lift more than 200 kilograms with one hand, or the method of acupuncture to torture people, he initially believed that Zhang Fengjai was a master of the inner family in the martial arts world. Because of the wealth accumulated by the Zhu family and the power in Ningji City and Dongshan province, they could not only contact the real inner family masters in the martial arts world, but also had enough financial resources and means to recruit top inner family masters to work for their family, so he had truly witnessed the strength of the inner family masters. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 96. The two Tibetan mastiffs in front of him were purchased by him from a top expert on the Tibetan plateau who was good at training Tibetan mastiffs and had a strong inner strength. He spent nearly 10 million to buy them. They are pure dogs that can truly fight with the masters. Blood Tibetan Mastiff. The only person who could silently kill two Tibetan mastiffs who were not inferior to the masters of the inner sect was the Taoist disciple of the Shenlong. Facing Zhu Zhenjun's questioning, Zhang Fengjai neither nodded to admit nor shook his head to deny, but said nothing with a calm expression on his face. Brother, can you do me a favor? Although Zhang Fengjai did not admit it with a nod, he did not deny it outright. This made Zhu Zhenjun, who had a high IQ and EQ, immediately know that his speculation just now was correct. Therefore, he quickly stood up and begged with a look of expectation and desire in his eyes. Brother Zhu, as long as it's within my ability and it's not something outrageous, I can help you once. Considering that Zhu Zhenjun not only readily agreed to his request, but also arranged for the little girl who was like a porcelain doll in the shortest possible time. This made Zhang Fengjai recognize the other party's character and at the same time decided to make up for the favor owed to the other party. Brother, thank you. Zhang Fengjai's attitude of readily agreeing made Zhu Zhenjun feel extremely excited. At the same time, he also decided to repay the favor first, so he quickly ran into the villa. Less than 10 seconds later, he rushed over happily with his mobile phone and car keys, and then gestured with a lewd expression on his face. Brother, let's go. Brother, I will take you to a good place where you can enjoy the Emperor's service. With his wretched expression and imperial service, even with his heels, he could guess where Zhu Zhenjun planned to take him. Although he also longed for such a place in his heart, considering that Sulitsi lived in Shen Loxi's house, and that he would have to maintain his peak condition to deal with soul-eating Gu and Zhu Ziqiang tomorrow evening, Zhang Fengjai could only politely decline. Brother, could it be that you are trapped by the shackles of love? After hearing Zhang Fengjai's polite refusal, Zhu Zhenjun looked at it carefully, and then couldn't help but tease. Although the relationship with Sulitsi has not been completely established yet, through Sulitsi's various performances, he can clearly feel the other party's affection, so in the face of Zhu Zhenjun's teasing, Zhang Fengjai finally chose to acquiesce. Brother, I'm not talking about you as a brother, why are you doing this love thing? Pointing to the door of the villa, Zhu Zhenjun motioned to go back to the villa first and at the same time, he began to instill all the disadvantages of love. What's the use of love other than finding a woman who is willing to live with you? Whether it can keep you full, or whether it can make you money for consumption. In fact, in my opinion, love is a grave where men's hobbies and interests are buried, a poison that kills men's fighting spirit and ambition, and a cancer that hurts men's family and friendship. After taking out 2 bottles of beer from the refrigerator on the first floor and handing one to Zhang Fengjai, Zhu Zhenjun persuaded him solemnly. Brother, listen to my brother and never touch love. Don't give up the whole area's splendor for the sake of a crooked tree. Don't give up the enjoyment of an entire flower bush just for the sake of a flower that may wither and wither at any time. Zhu Zhenjun's righteous explanation and reminder just now seemed to make sense, and was very similar to what his second grandfather said when he was drunk once, but Zhang Fengjai always felt that something was wrong with his words. But what was wrong, he couldn't figure out for a while. Fortunately, Zhang Fengjai's character is such that he can forget about things that he can't figure out for the time being. Therefore, after he drank the beer from the bottle, he directly asked Zhu Zhenjun what kind of help he needed. Brother, come with me to Dihao Entertainment City to meet someone in 3 days, and then help me impress the Taoist master next to him. When he heard Zhang Fengjai mentioning business, Zhu Zhenjun quickly put away his righteous attitude, and then said with a very serious expression. However, Zhang Fengjai, who could see at night, still saw a look of pain in his eyes that he tried hard to hide. My surname is Zhang, my name is Maple Leaf, and my Taoist name is Kingxiu. Just to shock the cultivators in the Taoist sect. After hearing the content of Zhu Zhenjun's request, Zhang Fengjai put down the bottle of wine in his hand, stood up and left the villa, leaving behind his attitude. I will appear in this villa on time in the evening for 3 days. Brother Zhang, leave an account and I will give you 10 million in pocket money first. Zhang Fengjai agreed so readily that Zhu Zhenjun didn't react for a while. When he reacted, Zhang Fengjai had already left the villa, which made him quickly chase him out while reminding him loudly. No need, I'll help you for free. Although Zhang Fengjai could no longer be seen, his reply sounded in his ears. Is it possible that 10 million pocket money is too little? Although he had no real contact with people in the Taoist sect, but through the fees paid to recruit top insiders in his family, Zhu Zhenjun guessed that the reason why Zhang Fengjai did not need them was probably because the money given was too little. This made him couldn't help but slap him in the face and blame himself. Zhu Zhenjun, you are such a pig, why don't you increase the amount of pocket money to 100 million? Are you short of money? Is your Zhu family short of money? Lingli cooperated with King Fengbu to return to Shen Loxi's villa, and then quietly sneaked into the guest room assigned to him. Zhang Fengjai did not go to bed to rest, but chose the windowsill to meditate. Although the practice of Taoism is based on absorbing the spiritual energy scattered between heaven and earth, after being tempered by the mind, it is transformed into spiritual power that can be stored in the Danshan. But there are many types of Reiki. For example, the sun's fire power contains burning yang energy. For example, the light power of the moon contains a feminine aura. For example, the power of the dazzling stars in the sky, and so on. This is also the fundamental reason why the inheritance of Taoism has never been cut off in a world where spiritual energy is so scarce. Of course, neither the flame power of the sun, nor the light power of the moon, nor the power of the stars is far as suitable for monks' practice as the gentle spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Therefore, the vast majority of Taoist monks still choose to practice in deep mountains and old forests where the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is relatively abundant. Zhang Fengjai chose to meditate with his knees bent and cross-legged. He also did not use the light power of the moon to improve his cultivation. He only used the absorbed light power of the moon to improve the strength of the thousand-legged blood centipede and the toxicity in its blood, which is convenient for dealing with Zhuziqiang. After all, the thousand-legged blood centipede's attribute is yin, and it is the most suitable animal to use the light power of the moon to improve cultivation and strength. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 97. Xing Tang Building. Shen Loxi excitedly directed the staff to set up 2 high-definition cameras in the northeast and southeast corners of the first-floor lobby, preparing to record a scene that would shock the entire Ningji city and even the entire Dongshan province. At the same time, Sulitsi also arranged a temporary customized donation box under the electronic screen on the east side of the first-floor lobby. It was just after 9 o'clock in the morning, which was the rush hour for Xintang building. All the staff passing through the first-floor lobby stopped to watch and inquire. Shen Loxi and Sulitsi, who had long anticipated the situation, arranged a dozen good-looking and hot sales staff in advance to promote Yongsheng Group and Zhongfenjai respectively. 300 million. Zhongfenjai, who looked and dressed very ordinary, would donate a huge amount of 300 million in cash on the spot. When hearing the inside story revealed by the staff of Yongsheng Group, whether it was the senior executives of various companies and groups, or ordinary staff, their eyes showed an incredible look. At this time, the company's senior leaders had no mood to arrange work, and ordinary staff were even less in the mood to punch in for work. They gathered on the first floor, waiting for the donation of 300 million yuan. Regardless of whether Sulitsi and Shen Loxi had made prior arrangements, the donation of 300 million yuan would cause a sensation, so Zhang Fenjai, standing in front of the electronic screen, did not care about the increasing number of people in the hall. Looking through the transparent tempered glass window, looking at the busy road, looking at the security guards of the large building directing vehicles, his eyes were as calm as a lake without any ripples. However, when Lin Chalan's red Ferrari sports car slowly drove into the front yard, and the 2 container trucks followed behind the sports car, the calm eyes seemed to be thrown into the water, and ripples appeared. "Mr. Shen, Minister Su, here we come." A salesperson guarding the automatic revolving door, after seeing the familiar red Ferrari sports car, hurriedly reminded Shen Loxi and Sulitsi in the hall. "Quick, turn on the camera." After hearing the staff's reminder, Shen Loxi hurriedly instructed the photographer in charge of recording. Sulitsi took the initiative to walk to Zhang Fenjai's side and waited with him for Lin Dayuan and Lin Chalan to arrive. When the red Ferrari sports car stopped in front of the building, Lin Chalan, who got off the car first, quickly went around to the other side of the sports car, and then helped a silver-haired but energetic old man out of the co-pilot seat. Although he had never seen Zhang Fenjai as an adult, through the transparent tempered glass window, looking at the young man standing in front of the electronic screen, who had a very ordinary appearance and clothes but had an extraordinary temperament, Lin Dayuan knew that he was Zhang Fenjai from the Zhang family of Shushan. "Lanur, arrange someone to move the money." Lin Dayuan looked directly at Zhang Fenjai, and after instructing Lin Chalan without turning his head, he walked towards the automatic revolving door. Although many company executives and staff gathered at the entrance of the hall, when they saw Lin Dayuan coming, they subconsciously made way. After Lin Dayuan passed by, they suddenly realized that they had taken the initiative to avoid him, which made them admire the invisible domineering aura emanating from Lin Dayuan. "Sinner Lin Dayuan, I am ashamed to see the descendants of the benefactor." When he was 3 meters away from Zhang Fenjai, Lin Dayuan suddenly knelt down on his knees to admit his fault and apologize, which also scared Sulitsi and she wanted to avoid him. After all, Lin Dayuan was not only the patriarch of the Lin family, a billionaire with a status of more than 1 billion, but also a silver-haired old man in his 60s. However, just when she was about to step aside, Zhang Fenjai suddenly held her jade hand and said softly, "Sister Litsi, you are qualified to accept his apology with me." Qualified to accept Lin Dayuan's apology. It seems that only by becoming Zhang Fenjai's woman and the daughter-in-law of the Shushan Zhang family can you be qualified to accept Lin Dayuan's apology. Therefore, after hearing Zhang Fenjai take the initiative to admit his identity, Sulitsi's expression was slightly shocked, and then she lowered her head with red eyes and stood beside him, with a gentle and obedient demeanor. Shen Loxi, who was standing behind a camera, subconsciously clenched her fists after hearing what Zhang Fenjai had just said to Sulitsi, and a hint of jealousy and unwillingness appeared in her eyes. As for the people in the hall, they widened their eyes as if they had seen a ghost, and their eyes showed an unbelievable look. Because with Lin Daeyuan's status and influence in Ningji City, even if he offended the municipal party secretary who offended the parents' official, or offended the legendary president of the Qinglong Chamber of Commerce, he didn't need to kneel down and apologize. But what happened next made their little hearts, which had already suffered a severe shock, suffer a second shock in succession. After knocking their heads 3 times, Lin Daeyuan stood up respectfully, then took 2 steps forward and walked 1 meter, and continued to kneel down and kowtow to admit his mistakes and apologize. I am a sinner, Lin Daeyuan, and I am ashamed to see the descendants of my benefactor. After 3 kowtows, Lin Daeyuan stood up respectfully, continued to take 2 steps forward, and walked 1 meter, and then knelt on both knees again to admit his fault and make amends. I am a sinner, Lin Daeyuan, and I am ashamed to see the descendants of my benefactor. 3 kneelings and 9 kowtows. In folk funeral customs, 3 kneelings and 9 kowtows are the highest respect for the deceased. And in the rules of the Jianghu and Taoism, 3 kneelings and 9 kowtows are the highest sincerity to make amends. However, after Lin Daeyuan kowtowed 3 times, he not only did not stand up immediately, but also did not raise his head, as if waiting for the thin boy in front of him to give the order of forgiveness. In the face of Lin Daeyuan's waiting, Zhang Fengjai did not pay any attention to him at all. His eyes were always looking at the front yard of the building. Lin Qilan, who was unwilling to enter the building to apologize under the pretext of directing the work of moving money. Yezi, please forgive others when you can. Looking at Lin Daeyuan kneeling on the marble floor, his body began to tremble slightly, and his forehead with silver hair was sweating. Solitsi, who couldn't bear it, couldn't help but beg for mercy for him. In response, after withdrawing his gaze from Lin Qilan, Zhang Fengjai looked indifferent and asked in a voice as cold as ice. Lin Daeyuan, it seems that you and Lin Qilan have made the final choice and are planning to cut off all ties with my Zhang family from now on. Only if Lin Daeyuan and Lin Qilan kowtow and apologize at the same time, the sins of breaking off the engagement and breaking the appointment can be wiped out, and there can still be a trace of incense and affection between each other. But Lin Daeyuan kowtowed to apologize, and Lin Qilan refused to kowtow to apologize, indicating that the other party intended to use the means of 300 million cash to completely draw a line with the Shushan Zhang family. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 98. Xintang Building, First Floor Lobby. To answer the descendants of the benefactor, my Lin family is just a small sapling that has just broken through the ground, and has no right to rely on the towering tree of the Zhang family. Faced with Zhang Fengjai's questioning as cold as ice, Lin Daeyuan suddenly replied very nervously. So, we still choose to grow up on our own. Lin Daeyuan, if you really have the charm of self-reliance, then why did you kneel down and beg in front of my great-grandfather 10 years ago, and why did you kneel down in front of my third grandfather 4 years ago? After hearing the reason why Lin Daeyuan made the choice to break off completely, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sneered and sarcastically said. For this, you even sacrificed the happiness of your granddaughter. Faced with Zhang Fengjai's ridicule, Lin Daeyuan did not refute or explain, but just crawled lower. Get up. Breaking off completely means that the Zhang family and the Lin family will no longer have any connection. 3 kneelings and 9 kowtows and 300 million cash represent that the Lin family no longer owes the Zhang family any friendship. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai had no reason to ask the other party to continue kneeling. Standing up tremblingly, Lin Daeyuan stepped back 3 meters, and then signaled the staff to put the prepared cash in piles in front of Zhang Fengjai. Even though there were as many as 10 staff members responsible for moving the money, it took nearly 20 minutes to finally move the 300 million cash in front of Zhang Fengjai. Looking at the red bills arranged like a wall in front of them, the hall kept swallowing saliva. Some people with poor self-control showed greed and impulsiveness in their eyes. Master Zhang, count it. When the last bundle of millions of red bills was piled in front of Zhang Fengjai, Lin Deyuan gestured calmly. Lin Deyuan, although you and Lin Qilan took the initiative to make a clear choice with my Zhang family, I, Zhang Fengjai, am not a heartless person. After the battle of Taoism in the Lin family villa yesterday and the vision of the bloody disaster at night, Zhang Fengjai believed that Lin Deyuan would never dare to do anything with the money. However, the other party seemed to use the means of 3 kneelings and 9 kowtows and 300 million cash to completely cut off all relations with the Zhang family. But the other party forgot a very important issue, or a problem they deliberately ignored. If it weren't for the great-grandfather's treatment 10 years ago, Lin Deyuan would have died in the torture of terminal illness. If it weren't for the third grandfather's help 4 years ago to resolve the disaster of the Lin family would have gone bankrupt and become ordinary people. It was precisely because of the second help of the great-grandfather and the third grandfather that the fate of the Lin family was completely changed. This kindness could not be compensated by 3 kneelings and 9 kowtows and 300 million cash. Although Zhang Fengjai didn't care about others taking advantage of him, he absolutely could not tolerate others fooling and despising the existence of the 3 grandfathers. Therefore, he wanted to leave a thorn in the hearts of Lin Deyuan and Lin Qilan, a thorn that was enough to make them lose their appetite and sleep at night, and enough to lead the Lin family to destruction. 4 years ago, when you took the initiative to betroth Lin Qilan to me, my third grandfather used the means of star divination to calculate the future fate of your Lin family and found that your Lin family would encounter 3 bloody disasters within 5 years. 4 years ago, the bloody disaster you Lin Deyuan experienced was the first, and the bloody disaster you and Lin Qilan experienced last night was the second. Next year on the beginning of autumn, all of you Lin family will encounter the third bloody disaster. Moreover, the power of the bloody disaster is stronger and stronger, and the consequences are more serious. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's seemingly well-intentioned reminder, which was actually a very sinister threat, Lin Deyuan couldn't help but change his face. As an old fox who has been doing business for decades, he can see that Zhang Fengjai's threat just now is not a joke. The Lin family must have another more serious bloody disaster. This made him feel scared and couldn't help wanting to ask for help from the other party. But when he thought about the decision he and his granddaughter had made to completely break off with Zhang Fengjai and the Zhang family, the words of help came to his lips but he couldn't say them. No. Zhang Fengjai, who had successfully left a thorn, certainly would not give the other party a chance to ask for help, and he directly bowed and saw him off. Alas! Faced with Zhang Fengjai's active bow and farewell, Lin Deyuan sighed with a trace of regret in his eyes and turned to walk towards the automatic revolving door of the hall. Compared with the momentum when he entered the hall just now, Lin Deyuan, who turned around and left, not only lost his awe-inspiring momentum, but also gave people a sense of vicissitudes of life that made him look more than 10 years older in an instant. Heaven's will can be forgiven, but self-inflicted will not live. As Lin Deyuan, who had aged more than 10 years in an instant, was about to walk out of the hall, Zhang Fengjai implicitly gave the final fate of the Lin family, turned around and looked at the piles of red tickets, with an extremely excited look in his eyes. Although all the money in front of him had to be donated to society, according to the 1% interception rate of wealth, he could get 3 million after the donation, and he would become a millionaire in one fell swoop. 3 million was enough for him to buy the things he needed to deal with the 9-headed monster in the place of leaking yin. Yezi, you really have to donate it. Looking at the red bills piled up like a wall in front of her, Sulitsi asked reluctantly. After all, Zhang Fengjai had already recognized her identity in public in the hall, so as his girlfriend, of course she had to consider the future life of the two of them. 300 million. If it was deposited in the bank, the fixed interest alone every year would be enough for them to eat, drink and have fun. Donate everything. As it concerns his own worth and life, how dare Zhang Fengjai withhold the huge sum of 300 million privately? Okay. Anyway, Her and Zhang Fenjai's incomes are not low, and whether or not there is a huge sum of 300 million will not affect their quality of life. Moreover, what falls from the sky may not be a pie in the sky, but may also be a deadly trap. Therefore, Sulitsi finally nodded and agreed to donate the tempting 300 million. From different locations, 9 bundles of cash were drawn out, and then after tearing off the bundled paper, all the 90,000 cash was put into the donation box. It was considered to be the official end of the donation that was enough to shock the entire Ningji city, the entire Dongshan province, and even the entire Huaxia country. Afterwards, Zhang Fenjai waited for Wang Denmei on the spot, waiting for her to lead the Red Cross and bank staff to count and accept all the donations. Although this donation was different from the donation in Gaihe Shopping Plaza, he could not withhold his own money privately, but as long as all the 300 million cash was donated, then the money earned by Taoism could be kept in full. As long as the amount does not exceed 3.02 million. Of which 20,000 is the share he deserves after donating 2 million in Lala village. Fortunately, Wang Denmei had already greeted the staff of the Red Cross in advance. So, 3 minutes after he completed the donation ceremony, Wang Denmei brought more than 30 staff members from the Red Cross and the 4 major banks to the lobby on the first floor of the building. At the same time, there were nearly 50 fully armed police guarding the various entrances of the building. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 99. Xintang Building, First Floor Lobby. Zhang Fenjai, it's you who made the noise. As the person in charge of protecting and escorting the huge donation of 300 million yuan, the captain of the criminal police team 2, Yang Guozheng, saw Zhang Fenjai standing in front of the donation box. After a look of enlightenment flashed in his eyes, he immediately stepped forward and teased with a smile. Hello, Captain Yang. As an acquaintance with whom he had a decent relationship, Zhang Fenjai did not care about the other party's teasing and responded with a smile. Hello, Captain Yang. Sulitsi, who had met each other once, also hurriedly greeted politely. Zhang boy, where did you get so much charity money? Yang Guozheng nodded to Sulitsi as a response to her greeting, and then pointed to the cash piled up into a wall and asked in a low voice. It's an apology from the Lin family. Zhang Fenjai briefly introduced the specific origin of the 300 million cash. Zhang boy, are you really willing to donate all this money in one go? Having witnessed Zhang Fenjai's strange and unpredictable abilities and methods, Yang Guozheng had no doubts about Lin Deyuan's willingness to spend 300 million yuan to solve his problems. However, thinking of the changes in life that 300 million yuan could bring, thinking of the affluent life with no worries about food and clothing, thinking of the luxurious enjoyment of being surrounded by luxury cars and beautiful women, he knew that he could not overcome his greed and donate all of it in one go. So, he wanted to know how Zhang Fenjai overcame his greed and the temptation brought by money. Faced with Yang Guozheng's questioning, Zhang Fenjai just smiled and shook his head, then stepped forward to meet several middle-aged men who looked like leaders. Excuse me, are you Zhang Fenjai, the one who donated this time, Mr. Zhang? Although Zhang Fenjai's appearance and clothes were very ordinary, from the position he stood in and the demeanor of communicating frankly with Yang Guozheng, several leaders of the Red Cross and the bank could still guess his true identity at a glance. That's right. I am Zhang Fenjai who donated this time. After nodding to acknowledge his identity, Zhang Fenjai quickly scanned the 5 middle-aged men in front of him, and his eyes finally stopped on a middle-aged man with a big belly. I guess you are the leader of the Red Cross. While actively confirming his identity with the other party, Zhang Fenjai observed the other party's fate through physiognomy. Private morality is damaged, public morality is mediocre, and official career is prosperous. Seeing the fate shown by the other party's appearance, Zhang Fenjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief. In life, there will be certain shortcomings, more or less, and no one can be perfect. For decision makers who are responsible for handling donations, workability is secondary, and the most important thing is morality and conduct. Because improper handling of donations will not only affect those who need help, but also hurt the hearts of donors. Although the leader's private life was a little undisciplined, the righteousness between his eyebrows showed that when he handled the donations, he was not greedy for personal gain or selfishness, which made him feel at ease to hand over the huge donation of 300 million to him. That's right. The middle-aged man with a big belly was very happy to be able to recognize his identity and status at a glance, and he quickly stretched out his hands to introduce himself. My name is Zhao Xiaofa, and I am the president of the charity union. Hello, Mr. Zhao. Although the following actions were a bit rude, Zhang Fengjai bowed with one hand in response to the instructions of the three grandfathers and tried not to have any physical contact with strangers to avoid being used by others in the future. Mr. Zhang is a monk. As a charity organization that helps the world, Zhao Xiaofa can come into contact with many strange people in the rivers and lakes, Buddhism and Taoism, and also understands these people's strange personalities and some practices that violate secular rules. Therefore, Zhao Xiaofa was not dissatisfied with Zhang Fengjai's refusal to shake hands. He just asked in surprise. I am King Xiu, the poor Taoist. I meet Mr. Zhao. Zhao Xiaofa's overly rational reaction also made Zhang Fengjai see his extraordinary knowledge, so he greeted him again. I wonder which immortal house Taoist King Xiu is practicing in. After getting Zhang Fengjai's affirmative answer, Zhao Xiaofa hurriedly asked. It is precisely because he can contact and understand the strange people in the rivers and lakes, Buddhism and Taoism, so Zhao Xiaofa, in addition to the work of the charity union, is secretly responsible for collecting and collating some information about strange people, and then reporting to the upper-level department through special means. He has no interest in the huge donation of 300 million yuan, but he is persistent in pursuing his identity as a Taoist priest, which immediately aroused Zhang Fengjai's vigilance. However, thinking of his origin, it is no longer a secret to many people in the lobby on the first floor, so he said it without any concealment. I am from Shushan. Is it Shushan in Fangshan town, Fuku city? Zhao Xiaofa asked with a short breath. Yes. It is Shushan in the land of saints. Zhang Fengjai nodded to confirm. I wonder what is the relationship between Taoist King Xiu and Taoist Wuxan in Shushan, Zhao Xiaofa asked with a little nervousness while breathing fast. Taoist Wuxan is my third grandfather in the secular world. Zhang Fengjai frowned and looked at Zhao Xiaofa, and replied cautiously with a stronger vigilance in his eyes. Zhao Xiaofa took a deep breath, calmed down his nervousness, and waved to a union staff member. When the staff member came over with a stack of forms, Zhao Xiaofa said with a smile. Master King Xiu, according to the latest donation law promulgated by our country, donors like you who donate 300 million yuan must leave their true identity information and origin so that we can register them and keep them on file. After hearing what Zhao Xiaofa said, Shen Loxi, who was standing behind the camera, couldn't help but frown. Because according to the provisions of the donation law, donors can either leave their true identities on the register or choose to conceal their true identities from outsiders. And many celebrities and businessmen who really do charity are very unwilling to be exposed in the spotlight. So, why did Zhao Xiaofa deceive Zhang Fengjai, who was completely unaware? Should I step forward and remind him now? However, before Shen Loxi decided whether to come forward to remind him, Zhang Fengjai smiled and shook his head and threatened. President Zhao, in addition to the official Red Cross, there are many other qualified large organizations in Ningji City that can accept donations. If President Zhao doesn't think highly of this 300 million donation, then I can only change the organization that donates. Don't. Since the establishment of the trade union, although it has received a lot of donations from the public every year, the total amount has never exceeded 50 million, let alone a single huge donation of 300 million. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuchi. Chapter 100. Tang Building, first floor lobby. If he loses the opportunity to donate 300 million today, although it will not affect his position, it will seriously weaken the reputation of the union charity and cause a lot of trouble later. So, Zhao Xiaofa hurriedly stopped him and threw the registration form back to the staff. Sister Litzy, let's go. The 4 major banks and fully armed police and public security were directly dispatched, and it was decided that the huge amount of cash of 300 million could only be donated to charity. As for the threat just now, it was just that he didn't want to leave any information about him. So, seeing that Zhao Xiaofa was no longer targeting him with ulterior motives, Zhang Fengjai stopped threatening. At the same time, in order to prevent Zhao Xiaofa from continuing to dig deep into himself, Zhang Fengjai nodded to Shen Loxi and Wang Denmei, then held Su Litzy's jade hand and left the hall. Although Zhao Xiaofa did not speak to persuade Shen Loxi to stay, he immediately walked to the corner of the hall after Shen Loxi's luxury car left the parking lot, then took out an ordinary 2G mobile phone and made a mysterious call. Guanghe Huafu, in Shen Loxi's villa. Zhang Fengjai carefully checked the talisman paper, sandalwood, incense burner, silver lock, money, and a big rooster weighing 8.8 jins that Su Shiqiang bought, and nodded with satisfaction. Uncle Su, what are you buying these things for? Shen Loxi, who changed into a casual home clothes, saw a table suddenly added in the middle of the living room, and the things placed on the table, and a puzzled look appeared in his eyes. Mr. Shen, I asked Butler Su to buy these things. Zhang Fengjai took the initiative to reply for Su Shiqiang, and continued to instruct him. Butler Su, you still need to take care of some things next. Dr. Zhang, you say, Su Shiqiang, who immediately took out a pen and paper, gestured. 1 whole pig head, 2 carps weighing 6.6 jin, 3 jin of apples, 4 jin of pears, and 5 jin of millet. No problem, I'll do it right away. After taking a look at the records on the paper, Su Shiqiang nodded and immediately arranged for the villa's bodyguards to buy them. Zhang Fengjai, do you want to hold a ritual in my house? The items on the table and the offerings that Zhang Fengjai had just asked Su Bo to prepare made Shen Loxi immediately think of the ritual in zombie movies, and excitement immediately appeared in her eyes. Su Litzy and Wang Denmei also looked at Zhang Fengjai with curiosity. In response, Zhang Fengjai just smiled and did not respond, then turned his head and asked Su Shiqiang, who had returned to the living room. Butler Su, when will the chairman be back? If the plane is not delayed, he should be back at the villa around 4 p.m. Su Shiqiang replied quickly. Butler Su, I'm going back to my room to adjust my breathing. Don't disturb me before the chairman comes back. The quartz clock on the east side of the hall showed the time of 11 o'clock in the morning. It was more than 5 hours before Shen Zhenghao returned to the villa. He just took advantage of this time to adjust to the peak state so that he could get rid of the soul-eating Gu and Zhu Ziqiang in Shen Loxi's mind in the evening. In addition, the offerings prepared will be temporarily placed in the living room. I will put them on the table again after the chairman comes back. Got it, Su Shiqiang nodded and agreed quickly. Ignoring Shen Loxi, who was unhappy, and not inviting Su Litzy, who was full of expectations, Zhang Fengjai returned to the temporary guest room alone, and then locked the door directly. Afterwards, he threw himself on the soft bed and began to sleep soundly. In order to increase the toxicity of the centipede yesterday, all the moonlight he absorbed from meditation was injected into the centipede's body, which caused him to consume a lot of energy. Although meditation can restore the peak state in a short time, it is far less comfortable than deep sleep. The key is to spend enough time sleeping. Damn Zhang Fengjai, he dared to ignore the existence of me and Sister Litzy. I think he must not want to work properly. Looking at Zhang Fengjai, who returned to the guest room without saying a word, Shen Loxi, who felt despised, was so angry that she couldn't help but plan to teach him a lesson. Fortunately, She also knew that Zhang Fengjai, who had an extraordinary background, was not easy to mess with, so she planned to join forces with Sulitsi, who had just confirmed her relationship with Zhang Fengjai. But unfortunately, Sulitsi pretended not to hear her provocation just now, and turned to talk to Wang Denmei about skincare, which made Shen Loxi so angry that she had to give up. Whether it is meditation or deep sleep, time always passes quickly. Just when Zhang Fengjai rarely entered the sweet dream with Sulitsi, the biological clock set in advance forced him to wake up from the dream. Zhang Fengjai slowly opened his eyes, but did not get up immediately. Instead, he stared at the exquisite decorative lights above his head, with a look of doubt in his eyes. As the saying goes, you dream about something during the day. It was normal for Sulitsi, who had just confirmed her relationship, to appear in the dream of deep sleep, but it made him feel very puzzled that Bai Jinjiao, who had already cut off her love, appeared. Moreover, as a sorcerer who practiced Taoism, every picture shown in the dream had a certain special meaning. The love between us is broken, and we are strangers from now on. These two sentences are not just simple sayings, but they are completely forgotten from the heart. Could it be that the love thread has not been truly severed, and Bai Jinjiao has encountered more difficult troubles again? Although he had some guesses in his heart, Zhang Fengjai did not intend to go to the medical school to help. Because he did not want to reawaken the emotional injury that had been repaired with great difficulty because of Bai Jinjiao's matter. After forcibly dispelling the image of Bai Jinjiao in his mind, Zhang Fengjai got up and tidied himself up, opened the door and left the guest room, and then walked to the living room on the first floor. At this time, on the leather sofa in the living room on the first floor, in addition to Shen Loxi, Sulitsi, and Wang Denmei, there was also a middle-aged man in his 40s, with elegant temperament and graceful demeanor, and a woman who looked about 30 years old and had a look similar to Shen Loxi. As for the housekeeper Su Shiqiang, he stood behind the middle-aged man. "Master, Madam, Dr. Zhang is here." Su Shiqiang, who had been paying attention to the situation on the second floor, had seen it the moment Zhang Fengjai just appeared on the stairs, and he hurriedly reminded Shen Zhenghao in a low voice. Neither standing up to greet him immediately nor showing him a smiling greeting, Shen Zhenghao looked at Zhang Fengjai with a serious and scrutinizing look as he walked down the stairs. Mother Shen, on the other hand, looked at Zhang Fengjai with a critical and scrutinizing look.